Today, we're going to take a look into the Old Testament, 2 Kings.
Second King.
We're going to be 2 Kings 2, 23 and 24, a whopping 2 verses.
That sounds like something I've done.
And if I've titled this this story Baldilocks and the Two Bears.
Like somebody's channeling me. Okay.
So, can I get somebody to read this for us?
2:23 and 24.
Read it off the screen.
You can.
Think I can.
Well, wherever you'd like to read it from.
I was going to read my new NASB. Is that going to mess
See, I'm a guy. I only have so many words that I can use in the course of the day, and I'm an introvert, so that's like 20% less for me.
Okay. 23 and 24, 2 Kings 2. And he went up from there to Bethel, and as he was going up by the way, young lads came out from the city and mocked him and said to him, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" When he looked behind him and saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord, all caps Lord, by the way. Then 2 female bears came out of the woods and tore up 42 lads of their number.
Sounds great.
Go bird, move over, right?
It does, right? And so a lot of times when you, I remember being in Sunday school and seeing the little, when you had the felt board and they put the little stuff up there, and I'm seeing this story, and you sort of get told like, hey, this story is about, you don't mock God's chosen prophet, you don't mock his leaders, you don't, or something bad's going to happen. And maybe you'll get an idea that's sort of like this. This is a lovely drawing that I've seen that's pretty horrible.
This is a story I don't remember at all.
Well, see, that's the other thing that I think is interesting about it, is because this is one of those stories where when you read it and you put it in and when you start at the beginning of 2 Kings and you go through this and you come to the story, this is a story where you look at it and you go, well, that's kind of weird. And then you just keep reading. You're like, okay. I don't, that's weird.
That's kind of my experience with it, is I've read it before, but I've never, ever heard it taught.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, see, I in the course of studying for this, I've listened to sermons on some guys that you're like, I've actually heard pastors use something along what I just said for Sunday school.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you should listen to your church leaders. This is why you should do what you're told. Because if you don't, something can happen. I actually got interested in this because atheists love this as a meme. And they really do.
The bald ones, especially?
Well, for a different reason.
Oh, okay.
Think about this. Okay, so you're an atheist and you want to say, why on earth would you follow this God? Think about this. He is horrible. And they start telling you, hey, you're bald. Get out of here. And what does God do? He sends bears and he rips them to shreds. What a horrible, malicious, cruel God it is that you serve. How could you serve a God like that if you believe he's real? This is the kind of God you serve. So here's an example.
Just nature running its course.
Yeah.
Here's an example of some of the memes that I've seen. You can see this one, if you can't read it from there. It's a picture of a very upset bear. It says, no eye for an eye, turn the other cheek, Matthew 5:38-39. And then it says, 42 children make fun of Elisha's bald head. God's response, send 2 bears to tear all the children limb from limb.
Well, to be perfectly honest, there was something that sounded a little different when I read verse 24.
Well, sure.
And that was 42 of them.
Right.
And there's more.
There's more.
There's more to it than that.
That's kind of like what I'm thinking. I'm going, okay, some got away, but
Right.
the fact that 42 of them, and by the way, lads, we're kind of talking teenagers.
Well, it's sort of this idea though. Think about it. Remember the joke? Remember the joke when you're growing up? You can just picture some Jewish kid going to another. I don't have to outrun the bears. I just have to outrun you, Eli.
True, but
It's more than 42, I'm sure.
probably so.
And the second one is actually from a YouTube atheist Bible study. You can see that.
That's sort of it's an oxymoron. And they got number 86. It's at least 85 before it.
Right.
No. This is a hashtag 86 because it is the whole 86 means take that out.
Oh, I didn't know that.
In culinary world, you got 86 to fries.
Well, this is actually a series that they do. These are reasons not to follow this cool, horrible, malicious God.
I see.
Stories from the Bible. So that's what got me interested in this, because on its surface, it seems pretty horrible if you think about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to put this in context to sort of get a better understanding, because as we always talk about, context matters.
Exactly.
So I thought probably the best way to do this is to try to figure out who Elisha is, and one of the best ways to figure out who Elisha is figure out who his mentor is.
Mm-hmm.
So his mentor is Elijah. So what do we know about this guy Elijah? He's a loser. Okay, you're gonna have
What do you
to
mean by that?
elaborate that now a little bit, Nate.
I'm just studying stuff to see if you're paying attention.
Okay.
His aim right now is to throw you off your game.
Oh, is that what he's trying to do? Oh yeah,
Let's
me too, kid.
The name right away, it seems to indicate Yahweh is God.
He cruelly murdered 400 people for no good reason at all.
Yeah, serving that malicious, cool, horrible God.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the neat things that I really like about Elijah is the fact that he is one of two people that never died, that we know of. I mean,
True.
we see him taken up and the whole chariots of fire and that kind of thing is really a cool scene, and I really like his actions on Mount Carmel. Those two are the two things that really resonate with me.
Okay. It's good. And what I appreciate about is his snarkiness in that situation, because
Oh, he's
You'll get-
probably going on vacation.
you'll see some more of that today in the video.
But after that great time, he went,
Yes,
That,
he was exhausted.
sure did.
that's kind of the weird thing about it. They're coming to kill me. Well, I want to die. Well, Jezebel will take care of that for you.
Let's be honest. If you're gonna die one way, why would you want to be killed by Jezebel? Like, women are terrifying. I mean, it's just fun away.
This said the guy who's got a girlfriend.
That side's too terrifying.
Trust me, with that experience.
Oh yeah. What else do we know about Elijah?
I can't answer the question because I already know the answers.
Prince of the Prophets.
What?
Prince of Prophets.
Yeah, that's a good one.
There you go.
What do you look like?
What did Nathan say about Elijah there?
It's the Prince of Prophets. The pop.
Prince of Prophets.
Oh, guys. Okay.
What do you look like?
I understood from scripture that he was a fairly hairy dude.
Hairy guy. Wore a
Yeah.
leather belt.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think his clothing also lent to that, because I think he wore furs predominantly.
Yep.
Consequently, he is, and I don't know whether this is going to step on the but he is correlated with John the Baptist.
Yep. That's for sure. What else do we know about him? Who was during his ministry? Who was king? Not for all of it, but most of it. What do you know about that guy? You already mentioned his wife.
Yeah, Ahab, the Arab. No, sorry, that's somebody else.
Yeah, King
King Ahab
Kind of good.
was the king primarily during. There were some of his sons that overlapped during the ministry of Elijah, but primarily it was good old Ahab. What do we know about Ahab?
He was
He's a
kind of-
cry-
He's a good king.
He's a crybaby. Naboth won't sell me his vineyard.
It was a nice thing.
No, he was. Oh,
He was a bit like Joe Biden, where someone else was running the presidency.
Oh,
boss.
Is that recorded?
Yeah, nice and loud.
okay.
Land.
What
Just
what
got fun.
what kind of miracles did Elijah do?
Well, you know what? That's an interesting point, because his student comes along and says he wants a double portion, and if you count them, he ends up performing twice of what
Yep.
Elijah does.
So how many things did Elijah do? One
I
thing.
don't know the number. I haven't counted them recently.
It was 7.
Which one was the one? I don't remember who does what.
Okay.
That-
I understand with the names like Elijah and Elisha. I'm probably, I told Sarah I'm probably going to butcher that multiple times.
I'm saying, why couldn't they just been different times and not together? Because it's so confusing.
Well, it's
But let's think about some of these.
Is it widow and the oil?
Do what?
Widow and the oil?
I think that is Elijah. What did he do as far as crops? What do crops need?
Water.
Water.
No rain for 3 years.
oh yeah, he was 3.5 year no rain.
3 years, something like that.
Well, I forgot that one.
He burned an altar and murdered 400 people.
Yes. And he's doing what? He's a challenger of idolatry. Right?
Yes, indeed.
Right? He's challenging the worship of Baal. Okay. So there's also something that I want to talk about because it's funny. Earlier in the book of 2 Kings, Ahab's son, whose name is eluding me right now.
Moab?
Ahaz or something.
Ahaziah.
Ahaziah. Anyway, he falls.
Ahaziah.
He falls, and as he falls, he injures himself, and he says, "I'm going to send some messengers to the priests of Baal to find out how this is going to end up for me." And so they're on the way to see Baal, and there's Elijah sitting there, and he goes, "Hey, why are you guys going to seek advice from Baal when you could go to Yahweh?" And basically he calls down a fire and he burns up the messenger and 50 of these guys. And so the king goes and he goes, "Oh, I'm going to send some more messengers. I'm going to send them to Elijah," because they describe the man who burns up his messengers. And, "Oh, that's Elijah." So he sends these guys and they go, "Hey, the king has sent us." And he's like, "Well, surely if I'm a prophet of God, fire's going to come down and burn you and your 50 men." And poof.
And now there's
And so now there's a third guy, and the third guy this time goes and bows down and says, "Oh, look, I'm just a messenger. Don't, I know you're a prophet of God. I know." And then this time Elijah says, "Okay, I'll go with you. God says it's safe to go with this one." So you'd have to imagine that with Elijah, a healthy dose of fear associated with him, wouldn't you think? Some respect and some fear.
Which one of the two was the one that was able to make the axe head float?
Elijah.
Elisha, thank you.
So this is Elijah.
Hey, Steve, there's another one here.
Mhm.
He's a grave robber.
Yeah, he sure is.
Explain that, please, Preston.
He can raise the dead.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I understood where you were going with that. Thank you, sir.
You think that would add a little healthy dose of respect and maybe perhaps a tinge of fear when you combine that with calling down fire and toasting people? Maybe.
So that takes it from a marshmallow roast to a mochacha roast.
Right. Okay. So,
Fire down. You raise them back up and send fire on them again.
yeah. I think the story, if you have a chance to read the story of where he's where the king is sending his messengers to Elijah just chilling on a hilltop.
Yep.
It's pretty funny.
And that is an impressive account.
2 Kings chapter 1.
Yeah.
The first couple of verses there. Yeah.
Okay. So we know this about Elijah. Let's delve into Elisha. And we're going to look at the calling of Elisha. So if I could get someone to read 1 Kings 19 through 21.
First Kings.
I can do that when you're ready.
No, I can do
Oh,
it.
you can do it?
Yeah. You're not allowed to participate. You can put it all together.
19 through 20.
Or see anything. So he departed from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yokes of oxen in front of him, and he was with the 12. Elijah passed by him, cast his cloak upon him, and he left the oxen and ran after Elijah, and said, "Let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you." And he said to him, "Go back again, for what have I done to you?" And he returned from following him, and took the yoke of oxen, and sacrificed them, and boiled their flesh with the yokes of the oxen, and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him.
Okay. So this is actually going to tell us quite a good deal about Elisha. So what can we tell about Elisha from what he's doing here? What also can we tell what's going on in the world around Elisha?
One of the things that seems interesting to me is, I mean, let's do a little bit of math.
Mhm.
Okay. 12 yoke,
Mhm.
24 big animals
Mhm.
plowing.
Mhm.
Now, one might say, on one hand, well, he just didn't want to do any work. On the other hand, he's using resources.
Uh-huh.
So that's just that thought that occurs to me.
What does that imply about his resources?
Good.
Money.
Yeah, he's got some resources because when you got 2 dozen oxen pulling your plow, he's hardly just got to do anything but steer it.
Well, he was plowing 12 yoke of oxen and he himself was driving the 12 pair.
Mhm.
So they were all in pairs and he was driving a pair of them, not all 24 at the same time. What
Okay.
happened from that?
Okay, that could be too. I did wonder about that.
But it does
Does that
tell
mean
you,
he had people driving the
Yeah.
other ones, so he had to,
Man of means.
so it tells you he's got a field, he's got lots of animals, and this is an agrarian society, so your wealth is based upon your land, your animal, those types of things. Now, also keep in mind, what's he actually doing here? He's plowing a field, he's preparing for, which indicates what about what one of Elijah's miracles?
It rained.
The drought's over.
Droughts over.
Okay, good point.
Okay. So how does he respond to Elijah's calling?
Hold please.
He does the exact opposite. His parents then sacrifices his animals.
Yeah. Think about that. That's his wealth, right?
There's no way back home. Like there's nothing to come back to after he takes care of these animals.
Right.
They
Now,
just,
because he just says he went back and took his yoke of oxen, which is 2,
Yeah, it's
Yes.
only
smarter than,
It's only
and
2.
burned his equipment.
Fathers
Yeah, so he did sacrifice 2, but not all.
And he also-
4.
aren't the equipment to build his altar. So that implies something else,
just cut his ties.
right? So that means he's
Committed.
he's all in. Right?
well, but then Elijah says, well, then go on back. I'll see you later. He almost as if he says, hold please, then I'll follow you. And he says, because you're not coming right this moment, seems like Elijah says, oh, go on. What have I done? And wrong choice.
I think that might be something more to that.
So the note that I have says Elijah's apparent lack of enthusiasm for God's plan, so I'm not sure where that came from, but I'll get back there, stands in sharp contrast to Elisha's reaction because he immediately leaves his normal employment to follow his new mentor, pausing only briefly to cut his ties with his old life, kisses his parents goodbye, and destroys his old means of sustenance. So, the Hebrew verb to kiss occurs 1-2 Kings and so forth and so on. So there's a bunch of different notes here, but pretty much saying that he is pause just for a second to cut off all ties
Okay.
and then heads on out.
And think about what Elijah says. He says, "What have I done to you?"
Mm-hmm.
You don't get that.
So think about Elijah's life. Okay. What he's gone through. And keep in mind that we're going to touch on this a little bit later when we get to sort of what's going on and to put this time frame in context. But there's a lot of hatred towards prophets of Yahweh at this point in history. Okay, because you're looking at King Ahab and Jezebel, who are promoting what?
Baal worship.
Right, and their successors are promoting the same. You got something?
Well, I do. I just have a question because I'm looking at when you guys said, what does it mean by what have I done to you, right? Did Elijah not think of himself as a mentoring type of person? And he's like, well, why do you want to follow me? I'm just,
Maybe.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to think.
That's a possibility because remember, as we said earlier, Elijah had that big success, right? With the 400 prophets of Baal, and having some fun with those guys and putting them to the sword when he's done. And then his immediate response was run. So maybe there's some of that. But I also think that part of it is like what life, here's a guy that's wealthy who's set up, and now I've called him to the kind of life that I have. I can sort of see him thinking, what have I done to you?
Mm.
I'm thinking of it more from that perspective.
And, if you think about ministers, talk about how hard it is to connect with friends, to make friends with their congregation, because people kind of hold them up on a special platform. I can't imagine the loneliness of the prophets back then. Because, he killed 50 or with God's help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not someone you want to get too close to.
Don't get on the bad side.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's interesting in this word, it says Elijah went up and threw his cloak around Elijah.
Mhm.
But you don't hear conversation, you don't hear any spoken words, we're not told what was said, so how did he know what that meant?
That's an excellent question,
Yeah.
because this goes into custom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's basically like a passing on of authority. It's like I am, and basically
You're
he
next.
would know. You're next. Yeah. You're my successor.
Tag, you're it.
You're my successor. And keep in mind that cloak is gonna come in later.
A couple of times. But and this kind of brings into an understanding of the custom and tradition of the time, because when you think about Ruth at night going and laying down at Boaz's feet while he's sleeping, probably in a slightly drunken stupor, and she just goes and lays down and uncovers his feet and just lays there. Well, to us in our 21st century Western world, it's like, okay, why would she make him that uncomfortable?
Something naughty.
Yeah, what is going on there? But when it was a symbolism where, and think about feet, by the way, when it comes to shoes
Right.
being thrown, that kind of thing. When he was to cover his feet up, he says, "Put your cloak over me, protect me." This is a symbolism. There's a symbolism in the mantle as well, the cloak.
Yeah. A lot of times, it's not, I don't think it's quite the same as the prophetic cloak that Elijah would have, but a lot of times in business transactions, they would make a transaction, they would enter into a contract.
Mhm.
And it was like saying one person would take off their cloak, their garment, and they would basically transfer it to the other person. That person would put it on. It's like, I'm identifying now with, Nathan has given me his cloak, so I am the same as Nathan.
Mhm.
Identify as Nathan. Sure. It'd be like that.
And then later on in the book of Ruth, we've got Boaz contracting business with another Goel, another kinsman redeemer, and takes off his shoe and says, "Okay, now I've bought, all that is Ruth's, including Ruth," and a whole another thing there. But we think about that in that time, but we don't remember that in the 20th century. We had a dude named Khrushchev that banged the pulpit with his shoe. Similar kind of culture. Or there was a time, I think, when someone threw a shoe at Bush.
It was in Japan.
Yeah. Again,
And he showed impressive reflexes, by the way.
that was again a high insult in that culture. So we have to understand some of the symbolism.
Well,
So,
I think, just looking at the text though, it's all there. I mean, we can talk context, but as I look at it, I see Luke 9, right? I mean, where Jesus calls the guy and he says, let me go bury my family and all that, right? And Jesus, even makes the point that nobody who puts his hand on the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom. I mean, maybe I'm missing what you guys are saying, but it seems to me that Elisha knows exactly what he did. And because he says, let me go deal with my parents, and then I'll follow you. He knew. But it seems to me that it's almost as if Elijah is saying, you know what I just did. This is how important it is. So let's get going. So I don't, maybe you guys aren't saying it, but it seems like he knows exactly what has been done. And Elijah, to the point, and Steve said snarky, and I think it is snarky. He's like, dude, I just put my mantle on you. What are you doing? Let's go. Not a lot of patience there. Plus, he knew he was getting ready to leave the scene, right?
True. Okay. So let's take a look here. We're going to take a look at what I like to call sort of the testing of Elisha, or maybe even you think of it as the training. So if I could get someone to read 2 Kings 2, 1 through 6. I saw a study on this that I'd never really seen this before, and I found it kind of interesting.
What was the verse again?
It's 2 Kings 2, 1 through 6.
I can do it.
Yeah.
1 through 6.
Yeah.
When the Lord was about to take, excuse me, the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elijah and Elijah were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elijah, "Stay there. The Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elijah said, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. The company of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elijah and asked, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," Elijah replied, "but do not speak of it." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, Elijah. The Lord has sent me to Jericho." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went to Jericho. The company of the prophets at Jericho went up to Elijah and asked him, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," he replied, "but do not speak of it." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here. The Lord has sent me to the Jordan." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So the two of them walked on.
So something interesting here,
CNN operation, letting everybody know that he's going away.
right? And what's Elisha doing while they're doing that? Elijah's like, "Hey, you can stay here." Elisha says what?
Yeah.
Nope.
No, I'm going to
Be in
be.
your presence as long as possible.
Now here's what I think is really interesting. Where do they start? The place that they start.
Gilgal.
One of Gene's favorite places.
Yeah.
What do we know about Gilgal?
I think there's a circle of rocks or pile of rocks up there. This is like the landing spot at the crossing of the Red Sea. It was the gathering place for regrouping for battle.
Yep. Something else happened there. But most of the male parties of the Israelites probably didn't enjoy that much. But
Oh, well, that's a big testing there. Yeah.
Okay, so think about this. So you've got Gilgal, what was a base of operations for the Israelite camp, right? But it's also sort of a sign, if you will, because of the circumcision that took place there. It's a sign of a new covenant. It's sort of like putting aside what happened in the past, all the 40 years of wandering. It's setting apart. So you've got a setting apart here. Okay. So where's the second place they went? Bethel. What do we know about Bethel?
House of God.
House of God. That's what the name means, right? How did we get that name?
Jacob.
What happened to Jacob?
Ladder.
Okay.
Commitment to tithe.
What else? What else do we know about Bethel? What's it been useful in?
What's it been used for? At what time?
Well, at different points in time, the Ark of the Covenant was there. So you're looking at a place that sort of symbolizes it's the house of God, right? It's the place of God's presence because the Ark dwelt there. Okay. So where do you go to next?
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
just before you leave Bethel,
Uh-huh.
it's also a location that was set up in the northern kingdom to worship.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get there.
Oh, okay, I'll shut up. Goodbye.
Yeah, you're done. You're good. You're good. Okay, so it goes to Jericho. What do you know about Jericho?
Walls came tumbling down.
Why? Did the mighty army of the Israelites
Nope.
just storm the walls and
They played really good instruments, so they let him in.
A lot.
So now I guess the question is were they ancestors to Doc Severinsen?
possibly? Yeah. So they're doing what? They're walking by faith. Right.
And no, there's an understanding I think we forget sometimes. Faith requires obedience.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if you're going to believe something, you need to do what you're told. And had they tried to do something differently, and then we have the whole, I can't remember the girl's name. The girl who says hides the spies and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Rahab, that's right. I was had an H in there in the wrong place. So victory, obedience, faith, God's power, all kinds of stuff revolve. And of course, Jericho's known as the city of palm trees.
So then where do they end up?
Jordan.
At the Jordan. Okay. So this one's a little bit what I'm looking at here is a little bit more of a stretch, I'll admit, but think about the Jordan, right? So they crossed over the Jordan to get to Gilgal, right? And how did they get in there?
They get to the Jordan.
Yeah, how'd they cross over? What did they have to do?
See, they built a boat and then
They built a boat. They built a bridge and they just got over it.
This goes back to the whole.
And
They had to step into the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
With the ark of
Yeah.
And
But-
then
At the same time, now as they're on this journey, as I recall, the mantle comes into play again.
well, when Elijah and Elisha are, yes.
Yeah,
We're talking, we're looking at Jordan in sort of a historical.
I see. I apologize. Yes.
So,
Step in, walk the ark into
Yeah.
the middle.
Yeah, they had to have the ark.
Right.
Steve, back to your theme, they had to have the ark.
yes.
12 stones, right?
Yeah, that's when they set up the 12th tent. They got the stones out and they set that up. So think about this. In a way, you can look at this is a sense of when in regard to the Jordan, you've got them going in to the water, stepping into the water. There was baptism look like into the water.
Into the water.
What is that? You're going through it and you're coming out the other side. What is that? When we baptize somebody, what do we say? The symbol.
Resurrection. Resurrection. Very good.
Death, burial, resurrection. Okay.
Wow.
So look at what you've got now when you put through that Elisha has been taken on a nice little tour of from his mentor.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So you're seeing the Gilgal set apart. I mean, that's what holy is, right?
Mhm.
You're set apart. Okay, you're chosen, right? Then you've got presence of God, Bethel. From there, you go to walk by faith. Okay, and then you've got life, death, resurrection, and you've got the faith angle again, and reliance on God because they had to rely on the ark, the presence of God, to get across.
Hmm.
Very cool.
So, having done on that, we're going to take a little look at a historical review. So we'll get back to what Weston was sort of going at. So let's try to put this time period of what's going on here in its place in history. Okay, so let's start by saying, what do we know about Israel at this time? This time of Elijah and Elisha. We're looking at what type of kingdom are we talking about?
Great kingdom, great place.
A great kingdom,
Yeah.
good place to live,
Oh yeah,
nice real estate, good price.
that's great deals. Best on videos.
So what do we know about it?
Divided.
Is what?
Divided.
It's
Divided.
divided.
Yeah, we got a divided kingdom. So we've got the southern kingdom, which is Judah, and we've got the northern kingdom, which called itself Israel. So how did Israel, well, how did the kingdom become divided? Let's think about that for a minute. Do we remember how that occurred?
That kid of Solomon,
And what was that guy's name? You remember?
Rehoboam?
Say it loud.
Rehoboam.
Rehoboam.
Oh my God.
And what happened with Rehoboam?
Didn't it kind of start before that?
Well, yes.
Only because Dad was a tax and spend kind of crazy man from that standpoint. Just saying. I know you're. I think that started it, but yeah, Rehoboam definitely made it happen. But
Right.
Just
He had a chance to not take that route. He was given an option, right? Remember, his option was to lessen the load that his father had placed on them, or they would have.
Mhm.
And do you remember what he chose and why he chose it?
His buds told him to do something different.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. We're gonna make it even worse. I'm gonna be your worst nightmare.
And did that go over well?
Such a dividing sort of thing.
It would have been great.
It was great.
Okay, so then the kingdom splits off. Now, what's going on as far as worship?
Before we go very far beyond this, I need to say something because we kind of get into some of this sort of thing in the next hour as well.
Mhm.
But the thing that really I all of a sudden understood, I had trouble understanding when I was younger, King so and so, King so and so, King of Israel, King of Judah, King of Israel, King of Judah. And I could not understand that until I understood the divided kingdom and Rehoboam and all.
Mhm.
What was his name? Jeroboam, I think.
Jeroboam.
Was the guy that ended up taking the deal. But yeah, this is something I think a lot of folks need to understand the historical background of this so that they can understand Israel, Judah, etc.
Right.
So I apologize.
Hey, Preston, did you want to talk about what you started to talk about before?
Well, yeah, Jerry Howard, sorry, Jerry Bohm, sorry.
Here.
He gets the Northern gang, and because there's a king that's from the line of David, good old Reo, down in the Southern Kingdom, they can't go to Jerusalem to worship, so they got to set up a couple high places elsewhere. One of them being Bethel.
Yep.
There you go.
So what they did is they made some golden calves.
Great idea.
They had great luck with that before.
Yeah, exactly.
It tastes really good.
Maybe so, I don't know.
I mean, the Israelites
Kinda
kind of
like
They did have to check that out. It was on the menu for a little while. So yeah, and he sets them up at Dan and Bethel. What did we say about Bethel again? I have a bad memory. We talked about that on Wednesday. I've got an etch-a-sketch memory. What did we say about Bethel again? What's it called? House of God. What's going on now at the House of God?
make music.
Not so much.
Wasn't it some Jeroboam, wasn't it, I think I read somewhere like the seed of Jeroboam's apostasy?
Yeah. It's one of the places where he's setting up a place to worship some golden calves.
Jeroboam, the son of
well,
Nebat.
don't we all worship the same God anyway?
Well, it was supposed to represent the same God. Supposed to. But there was another king later that we've already discussed, and his lovely wife came along. And they sort of introduced Baal.
Hmm.
It's not only just introduced it, it's if you think about it, we're talking state-sponsored religion, worship of Baal. And so now, during the time of our friends Elijah and Elisha, what's going on in Bethel and Dan? It's a worship of a mixed sort of a hybrid of the original sort of worship these golden calves that Jeroboam had set up.
I wonder why in the world
Okay.
would he pick the golden calf when they just had that wilderness experience?
Well, it's a little bit after
Why
that,
not?
but still, yeah.
Well, much like today, history isn't the.
Yeah.
People forget really quick.
Yeah.
History is not the teacher it ought to be.
No.
They just really wanted a hamburger.
There you go.
But what was the symbolism of the calf? Was that in other religions?
Oh,
Is that where they
yes.
picked it up and they wanted to repeat it to be
Yeah.
more like them?
Uh-huh. Well, especially if you think about it, if you look at where Israel came out of when they come out of Egypt,
Mhm.
the worship of many gods in Egypt, but the calf, or I should say the bull, was one of them.
Mm.
You can see tons and tons of pictographs
Mm.
of bulls. Even as a matter of fact, when the site that a lot of people have, when I did that study on the site in Saudi Arabia that may be the actual Mount Sinai, there's a platform that's set up, and that many people think that that's where the golden calf was set up because below it are pictograms of calves or bulls.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, what that really comes from, and if you stop and think about it from a agrarian society, this is an animal that you're getting just about everything from.
Mm.
So you can sort of see how they picture that as a sign of strength,
Mm.
especially the bull, strength, power,
Well,
wealth.
And you know what? When you talk about Baal and the calf, there's basically a picture of power and wealth. And so this is more of a devotion to self than it is to Yahweh.
Yeah, that's something. Nah.
Hey, Steve, just one other thought, because I think Diane asked really good questions. Like, don't they know about the golden calf?
It should.
But yeah, but I think the thing that I've always kind of gotten off in the weeds on with the first and second Kings is, they were culturally godly people, but they weren't really godly people, right? And I mean, you think about Solomon. I mean, the dude chased after 1,000 women. Wasn't. I mean, what do you think the godliness quotient was of Israel by the end of Solomon's reign, even?
Well, now we know the
So-
taxation. He had to keep on supporting these women.
I'm sure that was part
was
of it.
expensive.
Not back then, they weren't. They weren't worth much.
But yeah, it's
Got a big
it's
dowry.
almost like the world was sort of creeping into their religion here.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Devoted to themselves rather than devoted to Yahweh, or quite frankly,
To be
devoted to
devoted to the
nothing other than
temple.
themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds familiar.
So that sounds
It's kind of weird.
Nothing new under the sun?
No. Okay. So, just saying that, we're ready to dig back into the verses we were going to talk about. Okay. So, someone want to read that again, just to remind us, since it's been so long, on the memory of an etch a sketch.
From there, oh, you're reading
I'll read. From there, Elisha went up to Bethel, and as he was walking along the road, some boys came out of the town and jeered at him. "Get out of here, Baldy!" They said, "And get out of here, Baldy!" He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. It's been quite a pack.
Yeah.
Children are fast, the bear is faster.
Well, hang on a second. Now I'm getting context. All of a sudden, so they're on their way back up to the house of God.
Uh-huh.
And what version are you reading?
That's this one.
Oh, what version is that?
So it's an NIV.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Is it?
Oh,
Is this NIV? I think it, or maybe it's ESV.
If it came from mom, it's the ESV.
No,
I think it came
not
from,
ESV. That's what I thought.
which one is?
mine's ESV, but it's not this version either.
Okay, then I think it's
It's NIV.
the NIV.
Okay, and I was just kind of curious because I like the way hers read.
Yours
So
is
today,
King James or New King James?
mine is New American Standard.
New American Standard. Okay, because I was looking, the King James will use because my version said get out of here. Your version says get up, which is
Yeah.
actually important.
Mine NIV says, go on up, you bald head.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah.
So let's think about this. First thing I want to do.
I looked it up and this is the new international version. That's what that is apparently.
So I must have picked the new international version, and is it different?
The NIV is a new international
Yeah,
version.
that's what I got. That's what I got.
This is this
That's
one's
what
an
I got.
NIV UK translation.
Oh, well.
Oh.
Anglicized. Yes, the
Anglicized.
anglicized.
Okay, again.
What's Bible Gateway to
Well, this one
Complicated?
comes.
Can you read it with an office accent?
She's got an NIV.
Yeah. My NIV says that.
I mean, yours
Mine
says,
go get on up, bald head.
Get out of here.
That's okay.
So it says go up. You
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
Which
I
is
got,
even
I got
more
a ESV, yeah.
Okay. So let's think about this though for a second. Let's try to figure out what's going on here. Because is Elisha really just, being upset because he might have some hair challenges? Is he
Well, male pattern baldness is the sort of topic.
right? I mean, so let's think about that a little bit. What's going on with this mocking here?
So, dumb question, but was he already destinated?
Was he what?
What?
Destinated? Was he already at Bethel, or were they?
He's
because-
walking towards it and they're coming out of it.
yeah, so he says he went up to Bethel, right? And then some boys came out. So it's almost like he was going up, but
He's
they were
walking up.
leaving.
Okay, all right, so he
But then it says he looked,
And there is a change in elevation here, so that's why there's a description.
exactly.
He's going
but
up.
that's confusing to me because it says he turned around and looked at them. So they would have been behind him,
Yeah, so it's
He's
kind of
already
like
passed.
or as they passed.
Yeah,
and
it
they-
might have been. Yeah,
typical. I mean, when you're approaching somebody, you're not going to tease them. You're going to tease them after you pass them in the back. Not in the back.
so let's think about this a little bit. Is he just overly sensitive about his hair? You think?
I think they knew who he was.
Mhm.
For being very disrespectful.
Let's think about something. I don't really want to go there, but let's think about Leviticus.
Yes.
Nate's favorite book. What would baldness perhaps be a sign of?
I know sunniness.
Could have been a
He is,
sign.
he is bald, he is clean, but it can also, it depends on where you see it in, because if it's like skin disease and like cause of hair loss, that's unclean.
Uh-huh.
But if it's natural male pattern baldness, he is bald, he's clean.
Yeah, but which one do you think they're hinting at here?
He's a little,
He's a little unclean. You might have you could have a skin disease perhaps. Right? And that's what they're doing.
Mr. Sarias is going on.
Right. Okay. And think about this. What did Elijah look like?
Esau,
He was hairy.
Harry.
He was hairy,
like Esau.
Esau, yeah.
right?
Red.
They would know that.
Yeah. Well, that might be a significant contrast to them.
Right. Now, think about this, okay? Get out of here, Baldy. Get out of here. What did your translation say, Sherry?
Go on up.
Go on up.
Yeah, I thought about that, yeah.
He
So
was just taken up.
let's,
He was taken up.
Yeah. he
yeah,
was
let's
taken
get
up.
rid of this guy too.
I think.
Well,
Yeah,
it wasn't, he didn't have a popular message, so, you know, but,
Well,
you know,
that
hair was a
left
symbol
one.
of strength, right?
yes. Hair is a symbol of power.
Like Samson, right?
Samson.
Exactly.
Samson, right? So think about that. They're really saying, Elijah. Remember, Elijah has these folks have a healthy fear, a healthy respect for Elijah.
Now we don't have this going on with Elisha.
Right. Okay, so there's still a bunch of little kids coming out here, right? Little kids coming out
Like
here
6
yelling.
years old, leaving the town all their own.
Yeah, leaving the town, a whole pack of them. They're coming out and yelling at, and mocking this older man. So let's figure out who these boys are.
I mean, they fun of him for not having any hair, so he called some of the hairiest creatures on earth.
So good. So, who are these boys? Let's look at who these boys are. So the actual word is Na'ar. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. Na'ar Katan. If I'm butchering that, somebody please
You're butchering it.
feel
Can't
free
help you.
to help me. So let's try to figure out what this means and how it's used elsewhere. Okay. So a lot of times Na'ar itself is rendered children or boys. But it has a really broad, wide range of meaning. So in scripture, Na'ar is referred to the baby Moses, but it's also referred to fully grown Absalom. It can also have different meanings. It can mean servant, armor bearer, king's official, or priest. Well, let's look at Katan.
Hmm.
Okay, so Katan is an adjective, and it does mean small, little, or young, but small is oftentimes rendered social status. So
Hmm.
perhaps you're not one of the rich, wealthy elite, you would be a Catan. Not necessarily your size, your physical size, but your status.
Urchin.
So what it could also be is it could mean that you are a young male that is unmarried and you are not the head of your household yet.
Or in a gang like that, and I did use that word intentionally, a bunch of street urchins from Bethel.
Well,
No wonder the bears wanted them.
let's consider this though. Okay. So what do we say is going on at Bethel?
Oh,
That's lots of worship.
Idol worship.
Right. So remember some of the meanings of this word? Priests, perhaps officials of the government. So think about this, they're on their way out of the city. What if they came to the city, they're representatives of the king, they're officials? I'm speculating, I don't know. But let's say they're there to worship. Now they're on their way out, and hey, look, here comes Elisha.
Speculative for sure.
It is.
Steve, I love where you're going though.
Yeah.
I dig it because my thought was minor servants, minor officials, even.
They could even be servants of the priest or children of the priest, but they're not a gang of little kids like the little rascals running around just
Yeah.
terrorizing the streets of
They're
Bethel.
not 6 years old.
No.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
just while you're on this, because Bruce chimed in, because I love listening.
You're breaking up.
This is really kind of, these guys are, did you lose me?
Well, I think you're better now. You were breaking up there. Try again.
How about now? Better?
Yeah, that's better.
These guys may be apprentice priests. In kind of the same light, they're understudies of Baal or the other guys that Elijah had gone up against in Mount Carmel. And there's also now a school of prophets that Elijah and Elisha have been a part of. That's a contemporary kind of adversary force.
Yes. That's another possibility because you could think of it as a sense of one of the places that we talked about earlier that he went to was Bethel. And that's where some of these prophets came out and said, you're going to lose your master today. Right? Could be some of these guys.
Could be. I thought about that.
Your successor? This is the successor? This guy?
Bald.
He's bald. He's no Elijah. Right?
Yeah, we say that about successors a lot. He is not the guy who was before him. And that happens in a lot of different times. Joel Osteen's had that said about him. Jerry Jr. had that said about him and Paula. So, yeah.
So when you put this in its perspective and you think about this, most people would say, well, this is a horrible story. You see Elisha being overly sensitive and he goes out and now one thing you will notice is Elijah, he just curses them. He doesn't specifically say, may some bears come out and maul them. That's God. That's not Elisha. But on its surface, when you read this, it's either A, very weird, RV, that's kind of horrible. Right? But think about this. What does maul even mean? What does it mean to maul something?
Tear it up.
Damaged drastically.
Right, I mean, disfigure, right? It doesn't necessarily mean to kill.
Does it mean kill?
Can, but
Does it mean that?
it doesn't
Does it
necessarily.
mean all 42 were killed?
They were actually scalped.
We don't know.
They lost all of their hair.
But think about this. You're a lone prophet, a single prophet, walking along, well, maybe you probably not married. He's walking along to Bethel, which should be the house of God, the house of Yahweh God. It's not. It's a center of false pagan worship. And he is surrounded by a bunch of young men who are not little boys. And they're harassing and mocking him. That paints it in a whole other light, doesn't it?
Can I share a note?
Yeah.
So my Bible references the curse similar to the covenant curse of Leviticus 26, 21 through 22. This is not a petty act of vindictiveness. It is a warning of the judgment that would come on the entire nation should it persist in disobedience and apostasy. So Leviticus 26, 21, 22 says, if you remain hostile toward me and refuse to listen to me, I will multiply your afflictions 7 times over as your sins deserve. I will send wild animals against you, and they will rob you of your children, destroy your cattle, and make you so few in number that your roads will be deserted. Ouch.
And if I'm out of line, just say so, but I'm looking at the next verse that isn't part of our text.
Go ahead.
He went from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. So the interesting thought is, this is a smaller version of Elijah on Mount Carmel as he's headed to.
Yes. Right. And I meant to do this, skip this part. I meant to say this. When Elijah was taken up, right? And Elisha picks up the cloak, the mantle, right? He taps it to the Jordan and crosses back over. Now think about this. Does this sound familiar? Because you've got a transition here.
Well, that's a funny part to me, because I think that when they go across the Jordan the first time, Elijah is with them. He does that, and so students learning. When Elisha is coming back, he says something, and my version may not be, well translated. I don't know, but he basically says, "Where is the God of Elijah?" He's saying, can I just have a little bit of something going on here?
Yeah.
And then they parted the water, right? The parting of the Red Sea.
Yeah. Now think about that for a second. What happened with Moses transferring his authority essentially to Joshua? What was the first thing that Joshua did?
Jordan.
Crossed over to Jordan. Got sort of a transfer here of leadership.
Okay, cool.
Elijah, Elisha, Moses, Joshua.
Standing.
So
As it says, the company of the prophets from Jericho who were watching said, the spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha. And they went to meet him and bowed down to the ground before them.
Short-lived fame.
Yes.
yeah.
In respect.
So what can we take from this though? So what?
God is not cruel, but God is just.
Oh.
And I think that we forget that. What people are going to get, it's kind of like that Larry Alex Thompson, I think his name is.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love that guy.
Ideas have consequences is the name of his podcast. There are consequences associated with the direction we head, the mentality we have, the actions we perform. And when it comes to the very end, in the final analysis, a lot of times people just get what they've been preparing themselves for.
Anything else? So what? Well, I would say, in terms of individually in your Bible study, we said this, context matters. Speak up. Context matters.
Hey, can we speak up a little bit?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. So, for us, I would say context matters. And here's another thing. Think about this too, because you can draw some parallels.
Mm.
You think about it. You've got Elijah and Elisha both. They're going up against essentially what I would say is, well, in this case, it definitely is a state-sponsored religion. Look at your world today, right? Now, we live in the US where they'll say there's no state-sponsored religion, but all you have to do is look at the White House on Pride Day and look at where the flags are. Look at our culture today. Look at what you can and cannot say.
Whole cancel culture comes in
Right?
because there's not cancel.
Yeah, our state-sponsored religion is self.
Yes.
Atheism.
Essentially, in itself. You're right. Huh? So think about that. As Diane said a little while ago, things don't really, there's nothing new under the sun. Things don't change. They're still, you've got two prophets standing up against the culture of the time, against false worship of the time. Look, if you stop there, look how they attack Elisha. Are they attacking his beliefs? I mean, indirectly, they kind of are.
But they're really attacking him as a person.
And
And
represents
right,
He represents.
judgment.
right, they're bullying him is what they're doing.
Nobody likes judgment.
Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
Mhm.
Right.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that you find yourself in that situation, which if we keep going the way we're going, we are, let's face it, you're gonna find yourself in that situation. I'm not saying God is gonna send a couple of bears out of the woods to come maul people who are mocking him. I know that's disappointing, right?
Yes, it is. But it tells us in the Bible that if you present his word wrongly, you better be careful. You better watch out how you speak, how you teach.
Mhm.
Because there's an associated judgment with that, even harsher than, say, a layperson or.
Right. Right. But I am saying though that I do think that God offers you some protection when they're,
Mhm.
I think that you are protected. Again, I'm not saying that they're bears that are gonna come out. As disappointing as that is, Nate, that you won't get to see some bears run out and start mauling people.
It's kind of like as Preston said, God protects us as long as that's what he wants for us, because it could be something else needs to come out of it. Right.
It's, I told God I want you to die.
Not that he does, I'm just saying that it's God's plan, right? You're protected until you've done what God wants you to do, and then God's gonna take you back.
And when you have that mentality where either the Lord is going to protect my life here or take me there, and either way is good.
Mhm.
So there's really not a lot to get too concerned about.
Tell people all the time, I'm not staying on this earth 1 second longer than what he intends me to.
Mhm.
And even 1 second before
There
that,
you go. It's
it's his time. When?
I really think about Falwell, who numerous times said, until a man or woman of God's job is done here,
Yep.
they're indestructible.
Mhm.
I love that. And here's a man who literally died at the throttle. I mean, he was at his desk in his office, gone. I love it.
I kind of said something similar to that. I had an interaction at the gym, which I didn't bring up because it was more of a fail than a launch. But I was talking to the gentleman who across from me, and he made a mention of, how did he put it? It is so hard to get older. And I said, it is harder. I said, what did I say? The next, I can't remember now how I worded it, but basically, what's coming is better, but we have to work here until that time comes or something, work with what we got right here. And I was just hoping he would say, what do you mean by that? But he didn't, and then he moved on, so I kind of lost that opportunity, but it's like, what's coming is better, but we gotta be here first, so it's time.
So Just remember, if you ever happen to come across some atheist who brings this silly argument to you, now you know, put it in its context.
Yeah.
It's not, these boys didn't, sneak into some bear's house and eat all the porridge. That's what happened. God wasn't like angry so much that he said, I'm wiping boys out for no reason because this guy's bald. It's none of that. So just remember, and also remember that if you come across a piece of scripture, a part of scripture that you're reading, and it doesn't make any sense to you. But I like Jerry. I've read this probably dozens of times. It's just like, that's weird. And it just kept going.
Cool.
Or that's funny.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. It's unusual. But I don't understand why this is even here.
Mhm.
And you just move to the next thing. That context matters. There's always a reason that it's there, and it's not just something that they wrote in there because it's a funny story or because it has meaning for you if you look into what the context is.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
thank you for saying context matters. I think that's so vital. I had a weird conversation with a young pastor about 2 months ago, and I might have brought this up before, but it certainly fits here. And I've come to find out that he's kind of friendly with the whole Bethel church movement. A lot of kind of really drawn into the signs and wonder stuff at a pretty extreme level. But he said something to me that kind of clicks with what you just said. He told me, he says, I don't mind using scripture out of context if it works. And I thought, well, so then you can just say anything about anything then, right? And all of a sudden his attachment to Bethel totally makes sense, right? So that's one thing. Two, you hit on something that I think it's just kind of rattling around in my head a little bit with the idea of that these guys weren't necessarily killed. They may have gotten just roughed up, right? And lived to tell about it, but they certainly didn't mock Elisha anymore, probably. But it makes me think about the world today. You guys remember 9/11, right? When myself and many others were saying, this is a picture of what's happened. This is a picture of what happens when people defy God, right? But could it be it's a lot less about the major things that befall our country, and it's more about perhaps just a little mauling, whether it's the please, I said that, but let me kind of say it this way. It may not be the fantastical thousands of people dying in a major thing, but it could be the 2 people that get killed in a mass shooting and the 20 that are injured. And that happens again and again and again. It's huge for the people that are victimized, but against the context of our whole country, it's not a big thing. But it's the one after the next, after the next, after the next that we're seeing God's judgment over and over again. It's not so fantastical and so huge that it's getting people's attention. It doesn't mean it's not happening in whatever area that is. I hope that makes sense. I just, that whole idea of the mauling not necessarily being destruction, but just injury kind of leads to the idea that we're seeing God's judgment every day. We're just not even recognizing it anymore as a culture.
I think that's very accurate. I think that does go on. I just think that as a culture, we've become so
Desensitized.
I think that's part of it, but I also think it's like we're not really attuned to sort of a spiritual warfare, that kind of thing. And because of that, we're not aware of, we don't think of it in those terms, like, you turn on your news and you hear a tornado goes through a trailer park somewhere, and you're like, well, they're all talking about that's climate change or whatever. Not necessarily, right? It could just be God saying, hey, wake up. It's funny to me because you look at our culture today, and they will talk about lots of these mass shootings and things like that. And the culprit is always the weapon, and it's never the person and the issues behind the person who's pulling the trigger. To me, that's just a symptom of where we are. But we never try to address the symptom. We just try to treat the symptoms. It's kind of like medical profession today.
Band-Aid on.
Yeah, which will treat the symptoms.
Apples make it.
There's money in
Apple
treating
will
the
numb the
symptoms.
pain, but it's gonna come back, you know.
Right. So,
One of the other things that comes to my mind as Bruce was talking about and reminding us that in NASB they get tore up. God's good. In spite of what that might say, God's good because now 42 witnesses are able to go into wherever they're headed next. And someone says, "What happened to you?" Well, let me tell you.
right.
Exactly.
And think about that. These folks would have had like I said, they had a proper fear of Elijah. Elisha, they're going to test him. And they found out. So now it's almost as if, think about this, and I meant to say this too. When Elisha curses them and God responds in the way that he did, this is a very popular word today, but this is affirmation. This is God saying, yep, this is the guy I chose. You're calling him Baldy, but this is him.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, I've heard some other people think if you put this in its context, in its culture, they might not have even been able to tell whether Elisha was bald or not. Because very likely he was wearing something over his head.
Mm-hmm.
No. I also heard another guy discuss this, and he brought up that one other thing that they may have been suggesting to him when they say get up is to go on up to the high place and worship Baal. Now, that's speculation. And I tend to lean more towards the idea of you're no Elijah, got up.
Mm-hmm.
Get on up like him if you think you're that to wear his cloak kind of thing. But so anyway, that's what I've got for you guys. If you guys have any more comments or
Your reference to the calling of Elisha brought to mind something that I had actually I'd heard over and over and over again. This guy Benny Hinn, and I said, okay, well, let me see what this guy is all about. And he actually teaches on the calling of Elisha and the whole, and brings in some kind of symbolism for each of the locations. And so it was like, that's not all that weird to me. That seemed like it was an okay thing. And so I actually sent the clip to one of our foreign missionaries, John Napier, a couple of degrees, doctorate. I mean, this guy knows stuff. And I sent it to him and said, what is the issue with this? Why is there a problem with this teaching? And he was able to basically say there is a experiential foundation to this rather than a faith foundation, if I recall correctly. That's been a lot of years ago. John's been gone, what, 20 years or so? Yeah. So anyway, I appreciated your bringing it back to Gilgal, Bethel, Jericho, Jordan. I love that. Thank you.
by the way, his nephew Costi is an interesting guy. But his nephew shreds him.
Oh, really?
Yes. His nephew actually worked with him for a while in his ministry, and he just said, wait a minute, there's no Christianity here.
Mm.
And he came out and he speaks against him all the time and talks about some of the inner workings of that character.
Mhm.
Yeah, of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his name is Costi.
Okay.
He's an interesting guy.
Thanks to Diane, I remembered what I had forgotten about Monday. 2 events. Number one, there was a young lady walking on the street here. I had not seen her before, and it was warm, and she commented on that, and I was actually able to say, I know someplace hotter, and she said, fair, and kept on going. And then the other thing was there was a couple of ladies walking along as I was bringing them the are going out to bring in the recycle bin. And one of them, get this, one of them is an adjunct professor at Liberty. And just in 2021 got her doctorate. So this was an interesting thing. Lives around the corner. It was really neat to talk to them. They may, depending on what their world looks like in the future, they may be able to join us in some way. Doctorate in Christian leadership, actually, ED.
Okay.
Ed-D, whatever, education.
I don't think you should go around saying you're a doctor in ED.
Yeah, I was afraid to say that, but I did it anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. Can rely on you, Nate.
You've been watching too much TV.
I guess.
I probably watched that least amount of TV out of it.
That's probably good.
That's a true statement.
So anyway,
I think Preston had something.
How's the audio? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Preston.
Hey, Steve, great presentation today. Outstanding. Thank you, man. Your beginning of taking a look at Elisha's origin story, so to speak, points to the fact that Yahweh doesn't oppose the wealthy. He opposes the proud, but he doesn't oppose the wealthy. So that in itself is not an issue. So when Christians decide they're going to sell everything or they're going to become, ascetics and not own anything, that's not what the Bible's looking for.
Right onto Jet
And
Road.
number two, I actually had a chance to chat with a Messianic Jew this week, and our town, their town, really comes into play with this particular verse because they don't.
Quarter mile. Keep right to stay on
Sorry.
Jetport Road.
They don't understand that to be young kids. They understand that to be in context, referencing what Bruce's comment was, in context of the day. And this is one of those other things that this is where we know the Bible's written is written for us, but the folks of the time and of the culture would understand this better and differently.
Absolutely.
no question.
Okay. Any more comments or?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I was looking to see, was I right about the oil? Well, both of them had an experience with that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
Mhm.
What's the symbolism? And both of them bought back a young man. And it talks about Elijah stretching out on the young man 3 times. And they were like, why did he do that? And it said that he also did that in the New Testament. So it says 2 Kings 4 and then Acts 28:10. So, I mean, maybe that's the next thing you might want to think of. What's the significance of the oil? What's the significance of them both having those experiences?
It's a CPR.
CPR.
Well, and actually, the Acts reference, if I'm not mistaken, is our friend Eutychus. Because Paul stretches himself out on him, I think, if I'm not
Is that the
mistaken.
one that fell out the window?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Lucky Eutychus.
That's the one I was thinking about.
Yeah, so, yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Say Acts 20, did you say Acts 28? That's like the very end of the book. That can't be Eutychus,
Let's see.
if that's what she referenced. Can you find it again quick?
Yeah, nope, of course not.
There's only 28 chapters in Acts. So.
Yeah, 2810 doesn't pay to honor us greatly, and we're about to sail, they put on board whatever was needed, so I don't think it's 2810.
I was gonna say, that sounds like the,
Stretches them out, so let's see, Acts 28:10 is what it references here.
Huh, interesting.
And what does it say?
Well, 2810, the only thing that 2810 talks about is that they also honored us greatly, and when we were about to sail, they put on board whatever we needed.
yeah,
He's heading to Malta.
yeah, that's,
That's definitely a.
Eutychus is chapter 20.
I was marked through that in my thoughts.
oh,
28:10 leads nowhere.
What leads to Malta?
Oh, wait a minute, here we go. Here we go. It's actually before it. So you gotta start with 7 Now in the neighborhood of that place where were lands belonging to the chief man of the island named Publius, who received us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. It happened that the father of Publius lay sick with fever and dysentery, and Paul visited him and prayed, and putting his hands on him, healed him. So maybe that's what it's referring to.
No, because it said it was talking about stretching himself out on the boy 3 times.
Hmm.
And that was, I think, Eutychus.
That would have been Eutychus, but not this one. What if it's typo, so it's 20?
Must have been.
Let's see.
I did find it.
I'm looking at 2010 to see what that.
Bible drill.
Bible drills aren't the same.
Yeah, 2010 should be the reference.
2010 is the reference, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I fixed it in here.
It's right next to the publisher's the Bible.
Okay.
Fix that.
Yeah, you gotta put it in a errata sheet in the back of your Bible now.
Yeah.
Okay. Guess I will. Hey, Pastor Bruce, you want to pray for us as we close?